Hey everyone, welcome to Cuberviews, episode 42. This is your host, Ian Braverman. I hope you're having a great day. Today, I am joined by Zach Barash. How are you doing today?
Hello! My microphone refused to unmute for that moment. I'm great. I don't know. I'm at the end of another day. I get to be hanging out with you. We only get to see each other a couple times a year, so that in and of itself is a treat. And yeah, excited to talk about Cube, as is usually the case.
Life is good when you're talking about Cube. What can I say?
Mm-hmm.
It's always great to talk to you. You're a super nice guy and super fun to talk to you whenever I go to Cube for a Cause and other events. So,
Thank you. That's very kind to hear. I definitely have some really strong positive associations with you. In fact, jumping into a story already, I don't know how many times we've actually played against each other, but I do remember one of my favorite moments of CubeCon 2023 was you absolutely crushing me in Jabs' Modern Darlings with the kind of deck, super dirtly blue-white control deck, that I not only loved to draft, but was actively fighting you on. And I think you trophied that, and your deck was beautiful and wonderful.
That was such a funny draft because I don't know if you watched the recording afterward, but the commentators thought that you were on the blue-white control and I was on the Jeskai Twin. And so they were like, wow, Zach Barash is really destroying Ian Braverman here. And then we got to the finals and like, why is Ian in this? Wait a second.
I didn't even know that our match was recorded. I thought we were the backup match.
No, we were on the commentary. It was fun.
Well, I learned it in this moment.
And how is your daughter doing? How's fatherhood?
Man, I love it. I love it so much. My daughter, Sophia, is going to be 4 months old next week, which is wild. Like, she's got a personality. She's just like making these cognitive leaps. It's like one of the biggest changes that I've had in my life, but I'm really loving it. And it has fortunately happened during a period where there was a like bizarre lull in Northeast Cube events. So with the exception of Boston Cube Party, which I was never going to make because it was the week after she was born, I haven't had too much FOMO. And I'm looking forward to Cube for a Cause, which might have happened at the time this goes live, but hasn't happened at the time of recording.
We're going into the future. Oh my God, it's a time warp.
And then we took an extra turn.
Yes. And then I'll play Eternal Witness and get back the time warp. And you're also a very accomplished game designer. I thought they were great episodes. Everyone go check out the Lucky Paper Radio Zach Barash Files episode, the 3 episodes. I loved learning about game design and those episodes. You were the lead game designer for Kingdom Death. What was that? Tell me about that.
I should probably state this for posterity's sake. I work for Wizards of the Coast. That's where I do my game design nowadays. Kingdom Death. So Kingdom Death was my first foray into professional game design. I think I remember this spiel because once upon a time I led Kingdom Death's demo team. Okay. Kingdom Death is a 4-player co-op boutique horror RPG miniatures hybrid game. It's set in a nightmare horror world. Players take control of sort of a Stone Age civilization and hunt monsters to survive and grow, all while everything in the world is trying to kill them. I think that's like 80% of the opening line that I would have people say.
That was very persuasive. I want to play. Let's stop recording right now and get into it.
Well, it's a really interesting challenge because around the time that I was doing that, I designed the Learn to Play Magic curriculum at my local game store. And both Kingdom Death and Magic are like big, crunchy lifestyle games. They will be the game you play and identify with rather than one game of many that you play. And there's a big challenge in a game that's that big of how do you introduce somebody to that experience in something that's bite-sized and is not going to take hours. And with Magic and with Kingdom Death, the challenge I always set out was, what is the smallest amount of time, fewest amount of things that we need to say before we can get somebody in a game and taking game actions? Because the goal of a really good demo is not teaching somebody how to play the game and teach their friends by themselves. The goal of a really good demo is getting somebody to understand what's awesome about the game, to have the good experiences within the game, even if they walk away and they're like, I could never replicate that. I don't know what I was doing, but I want to do it again.
We want them playing Armageddon after a Black Lotus and destroying all lands and being like, yes, this is my game.
Well, like that kind of powered cube experience, there is something that is just evocative and addictive for a lot of people, even if it's a big turnoff for others. You know, you did something really powerful and dramatic, and there is value in that. And also, there's a difference between like a really, really good movie trailer and a really, really good movie because they have very different goals. A movie trailer is about hooking you, and the movie itself is about bringing you on a sort of adventure. If the trailer brings you on the adventure, why are you seeing the movie? And if the entire movie is just trying to hook you from moment to moment, it's sort of exhausting and nonsensical.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, you got to get in the 30-second elevator pitch. You got to get their butt in their seat. You got to get into the game before they say, I'm bored. I'm going to go do something else.
Yeah. And you want the game to last the right amount of time. I feel like I meandered a bunch, but that may well be happening a lot in this episode.
Totally fine. And you are the digital product manager for Wizards of the Coast. Tell me about
Yes.
that. How's that going?
So I work on the Magic Arena team. I wear like, I don't know, 16 different hats in my job. A bunch of them either are like too crunchy or they're too far in the future for me to talk about. But two of the hats that I wear that are at least more straightforward to talk about are I have the good fortune that I get to curate all of Arena's cubes. Although most recently, actually, I didn't just get help. I asked Chris Fartak, who graciously designs the updated Chromatic Cube, because I was on paternity leave, and that was such a relief. So yeah, I get to do cube design, which is really just me getting to continue the excellent work of David McDarby. And I also get to do digital card design and digital format management. Could you blame me for maybe advocating that Talion's Throne Guard should be a little bit stronger, mostly because of the Arena Cube? Who's to say? But like, you could blame me. I'm not saying it's worthy or not, but you could blame me. After 30 years of playing Magic, I have this incredible good fortune that I get to give back to this game that's given me so much and design things that my friends play and have fun with and that are engaging, hopefully, various parts of this community that I just love from the bottom of my feet to the top of my head.
Well, you're absolutely qualified. I mean, game design, all of your experience, but also an excellent Magic player, very accomplished Magic player. I mean, when I was at Cube for a Cause earlier this year, you took down the competition without even trying. The whole time you were like, oh, I gotta go, I gotta leave early. And then you won the year before. You're just an unstoppable force.
That is excessively kind of you. I would say I'm a pretty good Magic player. I would not say I'm a great Magic player. And I know this because I've engaged with great Magic players. Going back about 15 years, my background has been in team drafting. New York City had one of potentially the most competitive team drafting scene in the world for a long period of time. It was the home to Team Draft League, which I was a founding member of and one of the commissioners of. And that's just where I learned how to get real good at Magic from people who just kept beating me week after week. So I would say those are the people who are great Magic players. I've simply had the good fortune of getting to play a lot of Magic with them until I finally started getting to take some wins off of them.
The best way to get good at something is to get your butt kicked.
Yeah. And for most people, they won't stick it out because, like, that's not why most people engage with games. And I'd say most games, if I was consistently getting my butt kicked, I probably wouldn't stick with it. But for Magic, that feeling of growth is one of the intrinsic pieces of enjoyment that I get from the game. And the community that I've had the good fortune to be a part of in New York City is strong and diverse and shockingly kind, even though it's also super duper spiky. I think a lot of it was right time, right place as well.
I love losing at things. I don't know if that's a weird thing to say, but at pickleball, when I go 0-6, it fires me up the next week. I'm ready to go.
I think an extremely underrated skill is getting good at losing. Comfort with failure, I consider one of the best hallmarks of a talented game designer or just a good collaborator. If you're afraid of failing, you're going to play things safe. You're going to refuse to acknowledge things that didn't come out the way that you wanted to, which means you're not going to be focused on learning and iterating and improving. Whereas if like a mistake is something that you recognize as your best teacher, a mistake is something to be courted. It's something to be actively seeking out. And it's the kind of thing that's just going to lead to either rapid growth, or even if you're not looking for self-improvement, which I recognize I am like extremely blue in that regard in terms of Magic's color pie. But even if you're not looking for that, being comfortable not winning is just going to make you have more fun playing anything.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm hearing cube designers talk about it more often, but finding more ways so that people can have fun even when they're not winning, I think is a hallmark of somebody who's really designing for diverse audiences. Because at an 8-player draft, so 7 people are not going to go undefeated at a cube draft, but finding ways so that every single one of them can have cool bingo moments that are going to create great bits of story equity is going to have people coming back and is going to have people having fun even if they're not winning. And moreover, as a designer, you're setting those people up to have positive experiences while losing, even if they don't have that high degree of emotional intelligence that Ian Braverman has, and recognize that not winning still has lots of opportunities to be fun, because most people don't intuitively know that.
Speaking of not winning and losing a lot, the Cascade Cube. This cube, I do not know how to draft. Every time I've done this cube, I've gone 1, 2, 0, 3. I'm lost the whole time. This is definitely a cube that I love playing because I'm totally lost. But we'll get more into the Cascade Cube in a minute. First, I've mentioned it in the last few episodes. This is the first episode that we're recording it live while saying it. ConnectiCube. It's going to be happening February 14th and 15th of next year. And absolutely hope that everyone can make it. There are definitely still tickets left at this moment, but go buy them soon. We got some great cubes that are going to be there, like my Proliferate Cube that we've talked about, Kyle's Control Cube, Sam's Circle of Life Cube, Graham's Mono Red Cube. There's going to be a ton of great cubes there. And there's a Discord for it, so I'll have that in the description. Hope we can get as many of you listeners there and having fun there.
Amazing. And you can hear more about many of these awesome cubes on previous episodes of Cuberviews.
Yes. You should work for me. You want a job? I definitely hope that you can make it, Zach. I would love to have you there for sure.
It would be lovely. An advantage and a disadvantage of having a 4-month-old is that planning for the future is its own unique cocktail of challenges. Because it's like, oh yeah, what's life going to be like when my daughter is more than twice as old as she is now? I don't know, but I would love to make it out. And fortunately, Connecticut, not that far from New York.
There is a lot of cube in the area, but we always could use more. There's never enough. Awesome. And yeah, let's jump into the Cascade Cube. Like I mentioned, I've had the pleasure of drafting this cube twice before, once at Cube for a Cause, once in Baltimore. Ton of fun. Got absolutely trounced. It's a super crazy fun cube. Probably one of the most difficult cubes that I've drafted, but also super fun.
I did not set out for the cube to be as challenging and mentally taxing as it is. And there are a lot of bits of design that are really trying to rein in how exhausting it is. And I accept it's the most exhausting thing I think I've ever designed and probably will ever design, at least in the cube space. But I should introduce the core conceit of the cube, because this is a rules modified cube, and it's just got one teeny tiny simple rules modification, just a small one, which says all players begin the game with a Maelstrom Nexus in the command zone. Maelstrom Nexus, classic Alara Reborn Wooburg card, says the first spell you cast each turn has Cascade. Cascade, one of the more notorious broken and swingy and fun and powerful mechanics in all of Magic, where you cast a spell and then you randomly get a cheaper spell from your deck that you can cast.
What made you design this crazy cube? What gave you this inspiration?
So the Cascade Cube is, I think, one of many cubes in the tradition that came from the very first CubeCon back in 2022, where you had a bunch of designers in one room who were suddenly challenging each other by exposing them to the kinds of designs they'd never even thought of before. So this is directly inspired by Anthony Mannix's Turbo Cube and Daniel Wheatley's Reading Rainbow Cube, both from Baltimore. So the Turbo Cube is a radical recontextualization cube. It's also a rules modified cube where all spells and activated abilities cost 2 generic mana less. This will take a card like Guild Globe, a relatively forgettable but still sweet War of the Spark common, and turn it into something that's Black Lotus plus. Salvaged Mana Worker goes from like a pretty low quality fixing card, a 2-mana 1/3 that'll filter one of your mana once a turn, into a Rainbow Mox that you can use on your turn and your opponent's turn. But one thing I found about the cube is there's this mental translation where you have to look at every single number on every single card and think a little bit and change what those numbers actually are and what you're seeing. The cards don't actually do what they say anymore. Daniel Wheatley's cube, the Reading Rainbow cube, takes this kind of challenge of mental translation and it just has this beautifully elegant solution to the problem. So Reading Rainbow, it's an all gold cube, which presumably would mean it needs a ton of fixing. Or you could just give everybody a Pillar of the Prunes. Pillar of the Prunes is a card from, I think, Dissension? If it's Guild Pack, please forgive me, which is a land that says tap, add 1 mana of any color, but you can only spend it to cast multicolored spells. But if every single card in the cube is a multicolored spell, it's pure upside. Furthermore, because everything is gold, everything costs at least 2 mana. So this skips the boring first turn of the game where no one does anything, they just go land go. It also then does most of the fixing for you, and it creates this really cool emergent dynamic where you just get to delete the color from 1 pip of mana from any spell you cast. You could be like a mono red deck, but you have all 5 colors represented. Most importantly, it does all of this radical recontextualization just through curation and giving people a magic card. So it's just a game state that could exist in a normal game. So there isn't this same level of mental translation you see with the Turbo Cube. So I walked away from CubeCon being like, oh, I love the radical recontextualization of Turbo Cube. I want to find a way to take sort of forgettable cards, like it would turn out the Alara Reborn border posts, and make them into things that get people really excited. But I still want the straightforwardness of the Reading Rainbow Cube, where a card does what it says it does, and it's just a weird hackneyed battlefield, but it could happen. I walked away thinking Maelstrom Nexus was probably the card I wanted to build around, but just in case, I did a Scryfall search of every single artifact and enchantment that had ever been printed, and I think every single 5+ mana creature that had a static ability in all of Magic, just to confirm whether or not I wanted to go with Maelstrom Nexus, and the answer was
peruse.
Yes. Yeah, just a couple hours searching.
The 2 times that I've drafted, I've had a blast, and the first time I did it, I was a black-white cheat into play, get 4 drops quick with things like Dross Golem, which costs less, equal to the number of swamps you control.
Affinity for swamps.
Yeah, it's like a 5 mana 3/2 fear. And then Solitude. I mean, the pitch elementals are insane in this cube. And then the second time I did it, I was like, just a mono red, just dead, kill you, play 2 drops, cascade into 1 drops. Tell me about what the decks often look like in this cube, because what I've seen, it feels like there's a couple different deck archetypes where it feels like you're a low curving deck that you're trying to mostly curve into the really strong 0 and 1 drops that are in this cube that we'll get into talking about more, like Soul Talisman, or more of a higher curve deck that you're trying to curve into things that cost a little bit less, like a 5 drop into 4 drop and just go crazy.
So I think we might get into the sort of different heuristics of how to approach the cube, but to respond directly to that question, there are definitely intended or supported archetypes, and there are certain kinds of decks that I see represented more often. The Cascade Cube is a 360 card cube that is intended for 8-player drafts, so every card will show up, and spoilers, the Cascade emblem is going to make it so you're going to see a lot of your deck reliably. In general, oftentimes there's going to be a red aggressive deck that's utilizing burn, a white aggressive deck that's go wide. Sometimes those are the same deck, sometimes they're different. You're going to see mid-range or control decks, usually in the Grixis color combinations. Oftentimes there's a blue-black and a blue-red one. There's a pretty increasingly heavy support in artifacts centered in blue, often paired with white or black. Green-white will be a go wide or +1/+1 counters deck. There's also what I like to call a green-blue YOLO deck that is doing the most of what you were saying of just a bunch of big mana spells and ways to cheat on their mana costs. Everything from Force of Will to pitch elementals to the Great Henge. The average mana value of your deck is 6, but you're actually spending between 0 and 3 mana on it. You have the biggest boom booms around. And then there's multicolored piles, and every now and then there's going to be a train wreck where somebody warps their deck a bit too much around a busted 0 drop, which we'll probably get into more when we talk about the now banned Crashing Footfalls.
Absolutely. I love cubes that just totally recontextualize cards. Like the one that I've had a lot of fun with building myself is my Bolt Cube. I
Yep.
talked about in a previous episode. And it's a cube where each player starts at 3 life. There's many ways you could build a cube like that. For example, like Kilden on a previous episode that we talked about, it is like a totally different environment than mine. It's like it's 0 power creatures for most of the curve. And then you get 1 power creatures at 3 mana cost. And then above that at like 5 mana cost. So it's a much slower game built around each player starting at 3 life compared to mine, where it's just, you better take removal or you're going to die quick. So
Mhm.
it just lets you play all these strange cards that you would never see before, like kobolds become powerful because all of a sudden they're a 0 drop that can attack if you like pump it up or something, and the opponent's at 3 life. And this cube definitely does a lot of recontextualization, like we were saying. Could you give me like a walkthrough of different types of cards that get recontextualized?
Okay. So let's go through sort of the levels, the heuristics by which people sort of understand this cube. And if you want actually like a perfect distillation of it, Dom Harvey did this in an episode of Dominaria's Judgment in late 2023. Dom got it. I loved listening to Dom recount this. But so level 1 of this cube, the first thing people are often going to notice is that 0 drops are kind of busted. Cards like Mox Tantalite, Soul Talisman, Lotus Bloom, Profane Tutor, Ancestral Vision, like those cards, they're not strong enough for high powered environments and they're pretty awkward outside of it. In this cube, Mox Tantalite is better than any Mox that's ever been printed because, well, if you have 5 or more 1 drops, you're going to have Mox Tantalite on turn 1 every single game, basically. So you should obviously take these kinds of cards above everything else. The level 2 is then you identify, hang on a second, when Zach said the first spell you cast each turn has Cascade, he lingered on that. The level 2 is you understand that instants are completely busted. You understand Force of Will is a broken magic card. Playing at instant speed means you get to cast 4 spells per turn cycle, not just 2. So you can bury your opponent in board advantage. And moreover, expensive free spells can let you land devastating plays faster than your Mox Tantalite opponent will. Oh, you have a Mox Tantalite, so you get to play a 3-drop on turn 2? Cool. My Force of Will just cascaded into Blastoderm. What are you going to do about that? Then after that, you start identifying individual recontextualized cards. Like Tarmogoyf is busted, because when all this is happening and spells are flying everywhere, Tarmogoyf on turn 2 is oftentimes just like a 6-7. Ghostly Pilferer will just refill your hand like crazy. Poxwalkers and Delayed Blast Fireball are absolutely insane. You start learning things that like hand disruption is completely broken, because if you can Inquisition of Kozilek your opponent's turn 1 play, that is time block that also drew you a card. Finally, we get to level 3 where everything comes full circle and you recognize that having a good curve is busted. Like, yes, you want busted ones, and yes, you want busted pitch spells, but if you have a really good spread out curve, then your cascades stay fresh and good far into the game. If somebody is over indexed on ones to make sure that they always get that Mox Tantalite on turn 1, well, like, they're going to keep cascading into ones, and their cascades are lower impact, but you could cascade into Tarmogoyf or Ledger Shredder or Eidolon of the Great Revel. Having good 2s actually can be more important than having good 1s. And then we've sort of started from this is this bizarre cube where you should be taking 0s and then 1s, and it doesn't even matter what the 1s are, to, oh, we're back to basic Magic limited fundamentals. And while the particulars are different, having a good curve is perhaps one of the most important things that you could do. But that's only obvious if you go on this bizarre winding path of like, Alara Reborn Border Posts are your land drop, but the Cascade is a 3. So actually, they're really, really good. And Ragavan is one of the weakest cards in the cube, not because it's weak, but because boards fill up so quickly. And Planeswalkers are kind of weaker, and hand disruption is much better. As you can see, there's a reason why my cube spiel for the Cascade Cube when people are playing it for the first time is not anything to do with strategy. It's like, hey, there's a lot going on. There's a rules reminder card. I'm here to answer any questions. Be kind, rewind. And the first time doesn't count. The second time doesn't count. And by the third time, you will probably beat everybody.
Yes. And I really wanted to know more about building a normal curve in this cube. That's something I was really curious about, because like the couple times that I've drafted this cube, when I first did it, I was like, I'm just going to take Solitude, 5 drops that can cascade really early and try and get a 4-drop on my turn, a 4-drop on my opponent's turn 1 or something. And I thought this was going to be busted. I was really like, oh, this is crazy. But then I felt like I was losing to decks that can get something really insane turn one very consistently, like we talked about, something like a Crashing Footfalls or the Soul Talisman every turn, but then also like just a normal deck that would play a 3-drop and hit a 2-drop, and then play a 4-drop and hit a 3-drop. And I was like, maybe I'm thinking about this too deep and I should just play normal Magic and then also just get some extra value off of my Flicker Wisp and hit like a Karmagoyf or something.
That's one of the secrets of the cube, of normal Magic with a couple of these caveats is generally what's going to be winning drafts. Like, yes, if you can have a Lotus Bloom or if you can have Profane Tutor, that's just awesome. But if you've contorted your deck too much just to make those cards work, congratulations, you have an explosive turn one, your turn two is decent, and then turn three, you sort of cascade into nothing, and then you keep having air and your opponent keeps having action. So, yeah, identify the busted cards, but otherwise draft a coherent deck with a good curve. And that way, you get to turn four, you have action, and your opponent's probably running out of it.
Yeah, that's something that I really wanted to ask you also more about was card advantage in this cube. So I'm a big fan of Blink. Soul Herder, my favorite modern deck of all time. And basically what you're doing in that deck is you're playing a bunch of 2-mana 1/1s that draw a card, and that's perfect. You're getting some creature that does whatever, but it draws more cards and replaces itself. And in some ways, every card in this cube replaces itself in some ways, or at least is a 2-for-1. How important is it to take card advantage in a cube like this? Does card advantage get totally recontextualized?
Card advantage, it really depends on the matchup in the cube. But I would say, yes, you're completely spot on. The first spell you cast each turn is a 2-for-1. Every now and then somebody assumes every card has Cascade, which doesn't work. And then I don't love disappointing them that way. I try so hard in the design of this cube that when somebody asks me, does this card work this way? I get to be like, yes, it does. But card advantage is a funny thing. Some games go really, really long and you wouldn't expect it. And then they really come down to who's drawing fewer lands. Some games, people will completely run away with it. Like the red-white aggro deck goes Force of Virtue on their opponent's turn one into some creature, and then they are off to the races. Force Virtue, by the way, secretly one of the best cards of the cube and probably the most underpicked of the like power 20 or whatever that are in the cube. So yeah, card advantage is one of those weird things where sometimes it's amazing, but I feel like tempo, that nebulous chestnut, is probably the most important thing of making sure that all of your plays have impact, which is especially challenging when half the cards you're casting, you're not choosing to put them on the stack. You've cascaded into them. But then everything sort of becomes a deck building question of how much does every single component of your deck support the whole? How much of this are you just valuing good cards in and of themselves versus you are finding synergies between cards? Your 1-mana cards are allowed to be more sort of slot replaceable pieces because you're going to hit them. And then making sure that up the curve, every single one of your cards is more and more impactful. So this is a roundabout answer where I realize I just keep telling you, it kind of depends, man. And then every now and then somebody flips a Delayed Blast Fireball and it's a 7-for-1. Does card advantage matter, or is it just the tempo winning part of it? I don't know, man. It's a crazy cube.
Delayed Blast Fireball is such a beating. Oh my God.
I think more so than any other card in the cube, when that card hits the stack, the game ends.
Yes. And you also mentioned earlier how hand attack is very powerful. That's something that just feels unintuitive to me because in Modern, it feels like hand attack has become less powerful because so many creatures replace themselves. Like, for example, in the time the 4-color Omnath was really powerful, and that deck was basically playing up the beanstalk, and you had Omnath, and everything replaced itself. Hand attack did nothing against that deck. Throw away your Thoughtseize. So it just feels like in this cube where everything replaces itself, I would almost assume that hand attack would be bad. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, it's counterintuitive up until somebody casts Hand Disruption on you. And the things that are different here are, first, your hand disruption cantrips, or you are cantripping when you're doing it because you are cascading into it. And the second thing is having a turn every single play so that you can cascade is so important, particularly in the early turns. And if you lead on an Inquisition of Kozilek and take the thing your opponent was going to play on turn one, leaving them with nothing, you are so incredibly far ahead. It is basically Time Walk that drew you a card. And the Time Walk is sort of a 4-for-1 because, yes, your opponent didn't spend mana on their play, but you took a 2-for-1 away from your opponent with a card that is itself a 2-for-1. Not the most obvious thing, but that's why I would say black is probably the strongest color in Cascade Cube, and it's why I've throttled the power level of Hand Disruption. Like, Thoughtseize is one of 3 cards I've removed from the cube for power level reasons.
Interesting. Wow. That's something that I would have to just see it more and play it more because it's just like bending my brain. Yeah, but it's so interesting to hear you say
this cube is a terrible cube to play when you're already tired. This is like a great cube to play at like 10 in the morning. You've had coffee or tea. It is in full effect. You had a nice breakfast. You had a good night's sleep. And then you take a little break after it. But like, I've made the mistake of drafting this cube at 8 p.m. or 11 p.m. I didn't set out for this cube to be brain melting. I tried to make it less mentally taxing than TurboCube. And I would say it is less mentally taxing than TurboCube in the specific way that I aimed for it to be, which is not having mental translation. And instead, it is way more exhausting in other ways of like, everything is moment to moment tactics because half of your turn you can't plan in advance. You can just sort of hope and vibe that it's going to go out the way that you want it to. Everybody's flipping cards and the board is changing constantly. Things are just happening, and you also always have to remember that the spell you cascade into, which will resolve first, which sometimes when you have an evolved creature is great because you cast into an evolved creature and then it evolves immediately. And then sometimes you'll cascade into like a Ledger Shredder and be like, oh, but it doesn't trigger because I already cast the second spell.
Yep. And I really want to ask you about counter spells because in my experience, like when I'm playing like other cubes, when I have like a shardless agent in my deck, the first thing I do is say, all right, cut all the counter spells from my deck because I do not want to cascade into a counter spell. Mm-hmm. And this cube does have counter spells, but it looks like most of them are higher up the curve. So maybe you're less likely to cascade into them, or they have an alternate thing like Confounding Riddle that could also just draw you cards if you cascade into it at the wrong moment.
Correct. There are a lot of little bits of design that I'm doing to try and streamline the experience. I really want to reduce the amount of whammies where you cascade into a spell that you can't cast or that doesn't make sense to cast. So yes, that's why counter spells are by and large higher up the mana value so that you're less likely to hit them. Force of Negation is one of the most common whammies in the cube, but it is also serving a purpose there. It's one of the few ways that you can fight one of those busted turn 0 spells like a Mox Tantalite or an Ancestral Vision. And counterspells themselves are weird because when every one of your opponent's spells is a 2-for-1 that counterspell doesn't work against, counter magic is weaker. But when all of your counter spells are themselves 2-for-1s, they're stronger. And when instants are stronger, they're stronger. I wouldn't be surprised if Hand Disruption, just like way better than it normally is, counterspells a little bit weaker, but then every now and then they are the best thing you could possibly doing. Like Force of Will, completely busted card. Oftentimes you will Force of Will whatever your opponent plays on turn 1, and it doesn't even matter. Because if you flip into a God Eternal Kefnet on turn 0 and then untap and take your turn 1, you're in pretty good shape.
Yeah. And speaking of Force of Will, I mean, there are some cards in this cube that just become even better or just become crazy turbocharged with the game rules modification. Like Jace the Mind Sculptor is a card that I think has gone down the totem pole in recent years. It used to be an insane card, but I feel like in this cube, it gets revitalized because of just the way the Cascade works. Like Jace, I feel like there's so many powerful things in this cube. Like, for example, you can brainstorm to put cards back on top of your deck to be able to cascade into them. You can plus on yourself to be able to change cards that you might not want to cascade into. Tell me about Jace.
So the first version of this cube didn't contain any planeswalkers because I expected planeswalkers to not be able to pull their weight. Battlefields get very big, very fast. It's hard to protect your planeswalkers. Games can take a long time, but there aren't as many turns, so planeswalkers don't have as many turns to be activated. Then I did add a couple planeswalkers, and Jace the Mind Sculptor is pretty sweet. Part of it, I've included nearly every single brainstorm effect in all of Magic, especially of things not in blue like Scroll Rack. Jace the Mind Sculptor being able to brainstorm every turn, amazing. Also, bounce. Worth noting, you bounce your own creature, that's another 2-for-1. You get to cascade again. You bounce your opponent's 2-drop, like you gave them a 2-for-1, but also then they have to play off curve. Then that 2 is going to cascade into a 1 when the 1s are already not fresh anymore. So there's actually a lot of modality in the minus modes, but I'm pleasantly surprised with the fact that I feel like Jace isn't broken, but Jace is definitely very, very spicy. Partly because this entire cube is covered in ghost pepper, so nearly every card is too spicy.
Yeah. In Lelia the Blade Reforged, how does that card work? Can you write me a little textbook
Lelia the
on this?
Blade Reforged and the War Doctor, which is not currently in the cube. So Lelia says, whenever one or more cards are put into exile from your library or your graveyard, but doesn't matter as much, put up a +1 counter on Lelia. My understanding, and again, yes, I work for Wizards. I could get the rules wrong, but I'm pretty sure I know the answer to this, is when you're cascading, you are exiling cards from the top of your library one at a time. So it is not a single instance of flipping a bunch of cards. Every card you flip is a +1/+1 counter for Lelia, which means the turn Lelia comes down, that's a major threat. The next turn, Lelia's potentially an 8/8. Or if you get a really big cascade, like a 14/14. Yes, that is intended. Lelia is supposed to be big.
Now I want to build a really gamer deck where I have 4-drops and the only thing you can hit is Lelia that costs 3 or less. And then Lelia exiles your whole deck because there's no things that cost 3 or less. And then she becomes like a 50-50 and just insta-kills the opponent.
Yep, except for the fact that chump blocking is highly likely in this cube. And in fact, I will freely admit, cards like Shield Sphere and Ornithopter and Memnite, which are generally not among the strongest cards there. Partly they're there as zeros that can be cascaded into, partly they're there for the artifacts deck, and also sometimes they're just free chump blocker fodder. Hopefully one of the goals that I have in this cube of one player gets to have the experience of their Lelia is a 2020 and is the abyss, but the other player is doing similarly awesome things to counteract it. And hopefully both players get to feel like they're throwing incredible haymakers against each other and have a good time, even if ultimately only one of them is going to win the game.
All right, so I'll make it only 2 spells. Delayed Blast, Fireball, and Lelia. And then I'm good.
There it is. I've said it previously and I'll say it again. I do think Delayed Blast Fireball might be the most winning card in the cube, just because, well, it's not going to get put on the stack nearly as often as a Lotus Bloom will be. When that card goes on the stack, game's end.
Yes. And another thing that you write about in the outline, which is really interesting to me, is that average land counts are between 12 and 14. So in my experience, when I've played the cube, because you're cascading so much and you're thinning out your deck so quickly, it almost feels like your deck can very quickly feel like, why am I only drawing lands? Because you're thinning out so many non-lands so fast. Tell me about the dichotomy of lands to non-lands and why you might want to lower the land count in your deck.
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. When you're cascading through spells so quickly, oftentimes you've shuffled your entire deck by the third turn. Like the composition of your deck, the ratio of lands to spells just continues to grow turn over turn. The other reason is because so many spells, while their mana values are high, the amount of mana you're going to spend on them is much, much lower. Oftentimes the effective mana value of your deck is like 2. So you don't tend to need to hit more than like your third land drop to cast anything that's going to be in your opening hand, or almost everything. And then by the time you've hit that turn 3, congratulations, you've ripped like 6 to 10 spells out of your deck, and there's just a lot more lands there. But also, this is just vibes. I haven't done a hypergeometric calculator to the cube. For all I know, 12 to 14 is completely wrong, and the correct number is 9 or 15. I don't know. I will also say, with pride, every single 0-lander I have ever kept in this cube, that number is not small. I won the game just because, like, grief you, force of will your play, unmask is pretty devastating. But also, people rightly don't let me have those kinds of decks anymore. And also, yeah, that might be a reminder of why, like, grief and unmask are completely broken in the cube.
One of the most legendary commander decks I've ever heard about was you play Maelstrom Wander, which has Cascade, and then you make your deck only lands, and then Kiki Jiki and Pestermite. Have you ever seen anyone do anything completely nonsense like that?
My deck is going to do one of two things: lose or get to 8 mana. And if you have an interaction point, C point 1.
Or if I draw one of the two pieces, it's over.
And Maelstrom Wanderer is in the cube. I think it's among the weaker cards, but I feel like it needs to be there. And I do have a couple of cards that are specifically there for things like both good vibes and Soul Talisman, weirdly weaker than it looks because of how big the color restrictions are, and Lotus Bloom. I want those players to have cool cards to ramp into. And also Glimpse of Tomorrow's in the cube, which is why Kozilek is in the cube. Because when I first put them in, I think Gwen Decker, known champion of this cube, cast Glimpse of Tomorrow with only 4 permanents on the battlefield and hit both Kozilek and Lightning Greaves, one shot killing me, which is exactly why I put them in the cube. And it made me so happy to lose in that moment.
Wow. Yeah. When I drafted this cube for the second time, a cube for a cause, Gwen Decker was sitting right next to me. And also Gwen Decker was sitting right next to me for the Loam Cube. We just kept being put right next to each other like the whole weekend. And over again, Gwen was saying, why are you guys pressing these cards at the border posts? How am I getting it? And he destroyed everybody. 3-0, like not even close. But I just thought that was crazy.
This is definitely a cube that more so than almost anything else rewards you for experience. Because that's the thing. As we're discussing in this, there's layers to this cube, more layers than I would frankly love to have there, but I like what it is enough for it to be that. I like my designed environments to be more user-friendly. This cube is cool. Silly stuff's going to happen, and it is the spikiest thing I'll ever make. Once you get that, like, oh, hand disruption is the best form of disruption, or because the designer wants to limit the number of whammies, there's actually not that many ways to interact for small amounts of mana unless you're in red, because every single burn spell goes face. Those are all intended. Once you know that, and you're like, Poxwalkers, this card from Warhammer 40k that you may have never played with before. No, it's completely broken. You discard it to Ledger Shredder, and then you bring it back, and then you bring it back, and then you cast Delayed Blast Fireball, and the game ends. Or Dreamtide Whale. You saw it in Modern Horizons 3. It's got like a little quest. No, the last time I played it, when my opponent finally killed it, which they needed to, it had something like 8 time counters on it, and it had grown my Ledger Shredder into, I think, a 12-14.
Wow. Oh my gosh.
Part of the cube will just recognize understanding, so many of my priors are wrong. Ragavan is worse than Field Mist Border Post. Dreamtide Whale is better than most blue cards in the cube and is one of the bigger beefy things. And Mana Gorger Hydra is a 3-mana 12/12 trample that no one can kill.
Yes. And one thing I wanted to ask you before we jump into the pack one, pick one here, go over with you is you give players this little card that discusses the rules of Cascade. Why do you feel you need to give these to players? Is Cascade just such an insane mechanic? You just don't trust players to understand it well enough without this card, or how does that work?
It's less about trust and it's more about I'm trying to make the experience a bit more approachable. And moreover, there are just rules corner cases. So what I give players is, on one side, it's just Maelstrom Nexus. And on the other side, it is a little spreadsheet that just says, for every single mechanic in the cube, can you use this mechanic when you cascade into the spell? Which in almost all cases is no. It's really just there for kicker and adventure. Adventure, every single card is a 4-for-1. The other one is, does this change the mana value of the spell when I use this alternate cost? Which in almost every single case is no, which is trying to highlight the fact that, like, I played my Overlord of the Boiler Bilges with Impending for 4 mana, but I Cascade is a 6. It really is just there to preempt a lot of questions that will otherwise come up during the draft phase. And also, there's a moment of vulnerability when somebody has to express that they don't know something. And I want them to have that moment privately, if that makes sense. People are afraid of feeling like they don't know and showing that off. I want people to not have to do that unless they actively want to ask. And then that card will be there to just say, like, yep, it works the way you want it to. And over the course of the game, a lot of stuff happens. A lot of things happen. And I am trying to preempt a lot of rules questions to make the game more simple for people. And as you pointed out, I probably need an entire little section for Lelia, which is perhaps a reason to cut Lelia simply so that I don't have to have a rules section for it. In fact, there are mechanics that don't show up in this cube that make total sense here, but split cards, they're sort of more complicated than I want them to be. So I'm not including something like Fire and Ice, even though it'd be perfect, because the cube likes cards with a high mana value that can be cast for a lesser mana value, because I don't think they're necessary and I don't want another special rule. And Prototype, sweet mechanic, works exactly the way the cube wants, but Steel Seraph is the one card I really, really like. There just aren't enough Prototype cards to justify including the fact, well, like, technically you could Prototype when you Cascade into it, but you would never actually want to do it, which is why for a brief period of time when those cards were in the cube, when it was like, can you Prototype from Cascade? The response, which had to be very, very terse, was just, yes, but why? Which is something that people will still tell me at conventions out of the blue, which makes me smile once I remember what the heck they're talking about.
Do you think that there's a threshold for a cube that it becomes so confusing that it would just require so many judge questions for this cube to even really be playable for players that you basically have to give them a reminder card like this?
I would say the complexity threshold that I'm more worried about is along player experience. Different formats have different thresholds of complexity. You look at something like Vintage Cube, particularly Power Max ones. They're pulling mechanics from all of Magic's history, and it sort of presupposes that you know by heart every single mechanic that has ever been printed at a power level, even if there's only one card of that instance in the cube. Like, no shade to the people who do that, but that will make that experience less approachable, particularly when you then add on the fact that some of these require tokens or rules reminders so that the cards themselves don't say their total rules, or they're using premium versions of the cards that don't have rules reminders. I would say, like, Digital Magic has certain affordances that can streamline those experiences, but I do think approachability is something I want cube designers to be thinking about. Some cubes are intentionally less approachable than others. The Cascade is less approachable, and I'm putting that rules reminder there. It's not going to bridge that gap, but it hopefully is a ladder that some people are going to be able to use to climb up a little bit higher and bridge smaller gaps.
Man, this cube, I feel like I could just talk about it for hours, but let's jump into a pack one, pick one. I feel like I have unlimited questions for this cube, but I'll read off the pack. We have Hearth Elemental, which is 5 and a red, 4/5. The spell costs X less to cast, where X is the number of instant sorceries and cards with adventure in your graveyard. It also has Adventure, 1 and a red, discard your hand, and then draw 2. Yavimaya Coast, the blue-red pain land. DRC for you and me, Dragon Rage Channeler, which is red for a 1/1. Whenever you cast a non-creature spell, surveil 1. And it has Delirium that gets +2/+2 and has flying and attacks each combat fable. We have the green-white Border Post, which is an artifact for 3, 1 green-white that taps for a green or a white, comes to play tapped, but you can pay 1 and return a basic land to your hand rather than pay its cost. So it costs 1 to play it, kind of, but it has a mana cost of 3, actually. Bloodbraid Challenger, 3 red-green, 4/3, Cascade Haste, so you get that double Cascade action. And it also has 3 red-green, Escape, to play it from your graveyard. Then we have Lelia. Whew, we just talked about Lelia. Man, this card, we had to make it even better in this cube, of course. This card's not good enough. We needed more power creep on it. 2 and a red for a 2/2 haste. When it attacks, exile the top card of your library and you can play it. And like we talked about, it gets bigger when you put cards in exile. Then we have the red-green Border Post. Seal Removal, which is a blue for a enchantment you can sacrifice to return a creature's owner's hand. Red-white Painland. Scrubland. Black-white Duel. Fury. Man, that card's good. Banned in Modern. 3 red, 3/3, double strike. You can evoke it by exiling a red card from your hand, and when it enters, deal 4 to values you choose among a number of creatures and planeswalkers. Nettle Cyst, 3 mana artifact, living weapon, so you get a little Jeremy. Equipped creature gets +1/+1 for each artifact and enchantment you control. Equip 2, Blood Crypt, Black Red Shock. Ooh, we got Mizzix Replica Rider. I saw this card and I was like, this card is dope. It's 4 and a red for a 4/5 flyer. It's a goblin wizard. And whenever you cast a spell from any other hand, you could play 1 and a hybrid red or blue. And if you do, copy that spell and you can choose new targets for the copy. And if it's a permanent, gains haste. And at the beginning of the end step, sacrifice it. And then we have Briarhorn, a card I love. I've had in my Peasant Cube for years. 3 and a green for a 3/3 flash. When it enters, it giant growths a creature and also has 1 and a green evoke. What do you think of this pack?
I've got a lot to say about this pack. I know what I would first pick, but I'm actually more interested in what's second picked from this pack.
What are you first picking? Because I have my eyes set on Fury, and I'm curious if we're in the same position.
I think Fury is the default best pick out of this pack. As we've talked about, the evoke elementals, anything that has a high mana value but can be cast for a small amount of mana is really, really powerful in this cube. In particular, because there's so little cheap interaction, the fact that this will let you interact on demand is very, very powerful. And it puts you in red, which I think is in contention with black as one of the strongest colors in this cube. And moreover, you're going to wheel a red card out of this pack. Dragon's Rage Channeler is probably going to come back. Hearth Elemental is almost definitely going to come back. But I would definitely talk about other things. We've already talked about Lilia. We've talked about how the border posts are just excellent in this cube. 2 cards I want to bring out are Bloodbraid Challenger. This card is the biggest card advantage engine in the entire cube, most likely.
I love this card.
Graveyards fill so quickly, you will be able to escape this every single turn. And Seal of Removal, unassuming, is really, really strong. It is a cheap interactive spell that will answer any creature, which is already a huge deal. And as we talked about with Jace, the ability to bounce your own creature to basically rebuy a 2-for-1, also really good. Then, if you have something like Seal of Removal, your pitch elementals like Fury become even better because, well, Blink doesn't really work in this cube, and I know, I'm so sorry, Ian. You can still bounce something in response to the evoke trigger. But wait, there's more, because have you ever evoked a pitch elemental, then cascaded into Seal of Removal, and then bounced it with the Seal of Removal you cascaded into?
Oh,
because
man.
I've done that in this cube. Grief, bounce Grief, next turn Grief.
Oh gosh, that's evil.
So Seal of Removal is one of those unassuming cards that way overperforms. And also there's the fact that every single 1-drop in this cube is a copy of your busted 0 if you have one. And if it's not, it will still probably find you like a Mox Diamond or a Chromox.
Why is there no Ephemerate in this cube?
Great question. I really, really want to limit the whammies where you cascade on your first turn or on your second turn into an empty board that's still developing, and you hit a card that just does nothing. It's why Swords to Plowshares is almost a sideboard card in this cube. Like, I do feel like there needs to be some amount of cheap removal, but there's very, very little of it, and most of it is in red, because red spells can always go face in this cube. You can always cast them. That's why Ephemerate's not in the cube. There is such a high chance of you not being able to cast it, or it not doing what you want. And Rebound is also doubly awkward in this cube. First, because you might not actually want to cast a 1 on the second turn. You might want to cast like a 4-drop and cascade into a 3 instead. And secondly, Rebound is confusing because Rebound only works from your hand. Perhaps now it might be a little bit more awkward where I'm like, and this is why I have a rules reminder card and I have to curate every single mechanic that I put in this cube because I really want to limit all of those confusing moments.
Even with the Cascade feeling bad with Ephemerate, Ephemerate the Fury in response to the evoke trigger is still so good, though.
Yes, although I will also say people have that experience plenty in other cubes.
You can do that other ways.
And another goal that I have is I'm trying to recontextualize pretty radically a bunch of familiar cards and then having some unfamiliar or underperforming cards that like really get to sing. I love the fact that we're actually talking about 2 Alara Reborn border posts that are in this that otherwise are sort of like, when are you going to see those cards in a cube? Maybe in a Peasant cube, but even then, there's now so much good fixing. I feel like they've kind of fallen by the wayside in a lot of environments. Here, they're awesome. Like, yeah, I could take, I don't know, name a really good threat. Like, I could take a Ragavan, or I could take Firewild Border Post. I know which of those cards I want to take.
I'm staring at this Mizzix replica rider and saying this card is probably not the right thing that I should be doing. Pack 1, pick 1, but it's gas.
Mizzix is sweet. And when that card hits the battlefield, maybe it's not delayed blast fireball levels, but that card really, really strong. By the time it hits, you have spare mana. The fact that you get a 2-for-1 every turn, it makes it a 3-for-1. The permanent, yeah, you only get it for a turn, but that permanent probably is doing something big. And if it's a spell, you just get it.
So you're taking Fury, but what's like the card that you want to take?
I mean, I'm a known blue lover. I think I have played Seal of Removal 70% of the time I get that card. I play it every single time, and it's always amazing. I think that's probably the most unassuming card in this. Hearth Elemental, also great. Every single mode of that card is good. The fact that it oftentimes is castable for 2 mana, particularly if you're in Red Burn. Bloodbraid Challenger, it's rare that a card that you actually have to spend 5 mana on is outstanding, and Bloodbraid Challenger is probably the best long game card in the entire cube.
Yeah.
Also, we haven't even talked about Lelia because Fury's in the pack, but yeah, Lelia is sweet. Lelia is an 11/11. There are 5 awesome cards that I think the next people are going to be very excited about. And here's another weird thing in this cube. I love blue. I also love eating my vegetables. In this cube, I'll play 10 lands and eat no vegetables.
Who needs vegetables when
really
you're just casting everything for free? It's fine.
Hey, half the time Cascade is fixing your mana for you.
It's true. So everyone definitely let us know in the comments what you're taking. Definitely want to hear. Thank you so much for coming on, Zach. It's been awesome having you on the show. Anything else you want to say before we wrap up here?
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a real blast listening to Cuberviews. I've both been exposed to a bunch of people and ideas and designs that I'd not heard of before, or I'd only heard of but wanted to play, or people who I know and respect and love hearing them talk. So yeah, keep up the great work. Thanks for putting good into the world, and thank you for making the time to have me here. And for people who are going to CubeCon, I may or may not be there, but the Cascade Cube will be. I hope you have a great time, and also I hope you feel at least a little bit better prepared if you were on the fence. Maybe it's really for you, and if it's not, that's totally okay. This cube is not for everybody, and again, not for 11 o'clock at night.
Yeah, if you're trying to do some gambling, spin that wheel, get in the Cascade Cube. Let's do it.
That's a misnomer, actually. I would say the cube sounds like it is weird, high variance, wacky fun times, and it is so spiky and so high tactics and so rewards good deck building that it will both entice people for whom it's not the right experience, and it'll discourage people for whom it is the right experience. We talked about an elevator pitch. That's why I will often be like, just letting you know, if you're like, I think this is have a good fun time randomness. Actually, this is not that in any way, shape, or form.
I mean, my favorite commander deck, or one of them that I ever played, was Golos. And I would just play Golos and then spin the wheel as much as I can. So.
But even then, you have manipulated your deck such that probably if you hit a single spell, you're going to get a massively high impact thing. In this cube, so much of it is have a good curve so that you maximize the impact of every single one of your cascades at every point of your curve. And if that sounds like a good time for you, this cube is probably going to be fun. And if you draft it 3 times, you will know exactly how to maximize your fun. And if it doesn't sound like a good time to you, I am so grateful to you for having that self-knowledge. And please spare yourself from the exhaustion that this can entail.
All right. Do not play it at your 3rd draft at CubeCon on the day. Boom.
Unless you're like, I'm all about it.
Unless you're Joe Anderson and you're 60 drafts in.
Well, I am pleased to say I designed this for CubeCon 2023, and I think it was it did prove that it had an audience there. It'll be interesting seeing with the changes, what 2 years of time have brought, whether people still enjoy it. This is also a project that's mostly just complete for me. It's not like, I'd say most years it doesn't change that much, except in the past year, we got both Impending and Warp that are entire cost reduction mechanics that do exactly what this cube wants. And Warp in particular is like Adventure in that it lets cards be 4-for-1s. But we'll see how it plays out.
And we're going to be getting web slinging.
Fun fact, even though I can see the future, I don't ever do a cube pass for sets until something has come out. It's important to me to never apply future knowledge to any of these personal projects. I legit can say I have never thought about what coming up, even down the line, even that people are going to probably know the full set by the time this is released. I have no idea what I'm going to put in from that set.
Well, stay tuned, everyone. And thanks again for coming on, Zach. Everyone, please like, subscribe, follow. I appreciate it. And definitely check out ConnectiCube, like I mentioned before, and have a great day.
Thank you so much.